Hello everyone. My name is Jolene Noel and I'm the clerk to the board, and in the absence of an elected chair and vice chair, I hereby call this meeting of the Subdivision and Development Appeal Board to order. As per section 9.2 of the Town of Canmore bylaw, 2019-06 Subdivision and Development Appeal Board, and this being the first meeting of the calendar year, a chair and vice chair are to be elected. Therefore, the first item on our agenda this afternoon is for the board to elect a chair and vice chair for the term. I look to the panel to and ask for a nomination for a chairperson.
I would nominate Sean Krauser, who's not here but has said that he would stand, to be the chair.
Okay. And do I have a second nomination? And a third? No? Okay, so then we will, Sean Krauser has been nominated for chair via email. And I move the board to accept this nomination. Those in favor? Those opposed? None. Motion carried unanimously. So secondly, I will look to the panel and ask for a nomination of a vice chair.
I would nominate Mr. Greg Birch.
Okay. Do I have a second nomination? And a third? All right. With that, Greg, do you accept?
Yes, I would. Thank you.
Okay. Greg has been nominated for vice chair. I move the board to accept this nomination. All those in favor? All right. Motion carried unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you. So that was the business part of our meeting, and we have an agenda for that. But I would suggest that we, as the board, adjourn that or recess it, I guess, until later after the public hearing. We move directly to the public hearing. So if I could have a motion to recess the public meeting portion or the board meeting portion to after the public hearings.
I will make that motion.
All in favor? Did we decide we need a seconder or not? No. Good. So the first order of business is to adopt the board appeal hearing matters. There are two items on the agenda tonight, and you have the agenda in front of you. Can I have a motion to adopt the hearing agenda?
Move to adopt the hearing agenda.
All in favor? Thank you. So the first order, or the first item up is the development permit 2019-131. And I'll go through the process we're going to use tonight and go through well, just to make sure everybody understands what's going on and how we are going to proceed. So let's get my speaking sheets out. So the agenda has got two items, and we'd go to the development officer just to very quickly say what the first one's about. Just introduce the number, the file number, etc. Yeah. Not the whole presentation.
Good afternoon, members of the Subdivision and Development Appeal Board. My name is Richard Williams and I'm a Development Officer here at the town. And today is an appeal of my decision to refuse a visitor accommodation and drinking establishment at 630 10th Street, which is DP 2019-131. And I'll just go over the statutory requirements.
Sure.
So the application was first received on August the 2nd, 2019. It was amended on October the 21st. A notice of decision was issued on November the 21st. Appeal was received here at the town on December the 11th. Letters notifying the adjacent neighbours of the appeal were mailed on December the 19th. It was advertised in the Rocky Mountain Outlook on January the 2nd, 2020, and today is January the 9th.
So all of the requirements were met?
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome.
May I ask other town staff who might be speaking tonight to introduce themselves so that the audience knows who you are?
I'm Marcus Henry, the supervisor of the Pine Department.
So if you think you'll speak, please introduce yourself.
My name's Lauren Miller. I'm the Manager of Planning and Development.
Thank you. Yeah. And you heard Jolene Noel, who is our secretary or clerk tonight. She introduced herself right off the start. So that's who's hearing and in the room for that side.
Excuse me to interrupt the proceedings, but could we introduce the board as well?
Yeah, I was just,
Okay.
Thank you. I was just going to get that. So I'm the vice chair. I'm not normally the chair, and so you'll find a little bit of learning on my behalf tonight. We have a very consistent chairperson, Sean Krauser, and so I don't get a lot of practice, so you'll hopefully bear with me. The board members, from the right, please.
I'm Vi Sanford, and I'm a councillor with the town of Canmore.
Rochelle Harding.
I'm Greg Birch, the vice chair.
Jill Jameson.
Harry Scott.
Thank you. So the appellants for the first appeal that Richard introduced, could you introduce yourself so we know who you are, and if there's anybody speaking as an agent, could you just tell us who you are?
Hi, I'm Sarah Jones. I work for Harvey Law Office, and I'm appearing on behalf of the appellants, Jessica Whelan and Paul Booth, and they're both in this space.
Thank you. You've heard us introduce ourselves. Is there any objection to any of the 5 people up here hearing the appeal? No? Okay, thank you. So the hearing will proceed as follows. First, the administration will make a presentation, more detailed than the one they've just made. The appellant or the agent speaking on their behalf will go second and make their point. Third, people speaking in favor of the development officer's position will speak. In favor of the appeal will speak. And then the people speaking in favor of the town's position, opposed to the appeal, will speak. Then finally, there's an opportunity for those who have a position, but it's neither for nor against, to speak. So anybody else has a comment. We, the board, might ask questions of people during their presentations. The board would then check with itself through a brief recess to make sure that they've heard from everybody in a suitable manner. If we agree that we have, then we'll ask for the summary presentations. First, we'll ask them from the appellant and then from the town. Then the board will close the public hearing. We have the ability to make our decision as soon as we can, but the law allows us 15 days. We typically meet after the hearing in closed session or in camera to make that decision, and we'll release it as soon as we can, but it would be within a maximum of 15 days following the close of the hearing. The purpose of the hearing tonight, of course, is to hear from all of those who have an interest in this matter. We will hear a wide variety of comments, I'm sure. We'll ask you not to repeat those who have gone before you. If you are standing up in support or in opposition of anything and you think you've heard it from someone who's gone previously, if you just say quickly that you support them and their positions, that would be fine. It speeds up the process for us. If you have paper material, please provide a copy, as part of a submission, please provide a copy to Jolene over on the right here, so that she has a copy for the records. And as well, just so that we make sure we get your name straight, at some point, either as you come up to speak or as you leave, just probably more convenient as you leave, just Jolene has a clipboard there and a pen, and just write it down. That way we get the correct spelling of your name for the hearing record, the minutes of the meeting. And I think that's it. Do you, the appellants, have any concerns about how we intend to undertake this? No? Okay. All right then. Mr. Development Officer, I'll call on you to give a full overview of your position.
So just to give you some context here, about 630 10th Street, it's highlighted in red, facing both 10th Street and 6th Avenue. You've got Policeman's Creek to the east and north, and Mallard Alley to the west. Just some further context here, this is a plot plan that was provided as part of a garage application back in 2004. It just more clearly shows the home shown in this area here. You've got Policeman's Creek running to the east, the driveway, some fencing, an informal shed here, 6th Avenue and 10th Street. Just further to that context, here's at the intersection of Mallard Alley and 6th Avenue towards the property. You've got some mature vegetation, some fencing. Here's the shed that I mentioned, some informal parking. Here's from the intersection more towards 10th Street and 6th Avenue. Again, some vegetation and fencing. Here's the garage that I mentioned just before, and the driveway where the proposed parking will be located. And the outlook from 10th Street here, you notice the garage through the trees here, and again, some fencing. And this was the application. The red line here is superimposed upon the plans just to show the delineation between the visitor accommodation, which was 1 suite and 2 bedrooms in this area here. And the dwelling unit was proposed to be towards 10th Street in this area in here. And I just note that the proposed drinking establishment was not shown on these plans. And the parking, as I mentioned before, was proposed to be in the driveway. The proposed 2 stalls for the visitor accommodation, 2 stalls for the dwelling unit, 1 within the garage, and the parking for the drinking establishment was not shown. And so the reasons for refusal generally summarised as 4 points: the definition of visitor accommodation, definition of drinking establishment, the internal connection between a commercial use, which is visitor accommodation, and residential use, which is the dwelling unit, was not to the satisfaction of the Development Authority. The proposed development also does not create a pedestrian-orientated streetscape as required in the town centre district. And so up first was the visitor accommodation, and this is the definition as provided in section 14 of the land use bylaw, and in particular it means a building or group of buildings not intended for residential use, where sleeping facilities are provided for persons for periods of up to 30 days. It also further goes on to say may also include recreational facilities, commercial uses, and additional facilities, including but not limited to eating establishments, drinking establishments, room service, meeting rooms, public convention rooms, and a laundry service. There is more definition there, and we can go over it later if you wish, but the principal piece of the definition is included there, where it's a building not intended for residential use. And the proposal includes visitor accommodation, including that residential use, which is the dwelling unit, all within a building, therefore deemed contrary to the definition as provided in the land use bylaw. The proposal was more similar to what we would define as a bed and breakfast in the land use bylaw, which is an auxiliary commercial use operated by the permanent resident of the dwelling, providing a maximum accommodation of up to 3 guest rooms to a maximum of 6 persons for periods of 14 days or less, with 1 meal provided by the operator to the registered guests on a daily basis. And I would note that in the town centre district, the bed and breakfast use is not listed. Therefore, the applicant is unable to apply for that use at this property. Next up is the drinking establishment, as a facility licensed by the Alberta Gaming and Liquor Commission, where alcoholic beverages are served to the general public for consumption on the premises, and where any preparation of serving is accessory thereto. The applicant proposed the drinking establishment as part of the amended application. They did not show where that exactly is located, but they did indicate that it They did not intend to serve alcoholic beverages to the general public, therefore in contravention of the definition as provided in the bylaw. Next up, as part of the town centre district, the dwelling unit, part of the town centre district in section 3.1.5.11, it talks to dwelling units and tourist homes. They may be allowed on the same floor as a commercial use, where there is physical separation of uses and separate entrances to the satisfaction of the development authority. The application proposed here, just highlighted in the red circle, is a locked door between the two uses. That was deemed not to our satisfaction. We're looking for more separation between uses in the town centre or district to limit nuisances and any connection between those two different occupants. And last up, in the town centre district, it's looking for a pedestrian-orientated streetscape for the commercial uses, which would include design elements such as wide sidewalks, arcades, pedestrian scale street lighting, bicycle parking, canopies, vestibules, facade treatments, and further to that, the permeability of facades by the use of glass and doors. And the proposal, this would be the main entrance for the proposed visitor accommodation, and as I mentioned, as part of those context photos includes more of the fencing, the mature vegetation, accessory buildings, informal parking, which is not what we would consider a pedestrian-orientated streetscape. And then so, in conclusion, the proposal was refused for the following reasons. It's contrary to the definition of a visitor accommodation, the definition of a drinking establishment, the internal connection was considered unsatisfactory by the Development Authority, and lastly, the proposal would not create a pedestrian-orientated streetscape as required in the district, and if required, there's a Schedule A ready should it be needed. I'm happy to take any questions if you have any right now.
So any questions from the board members? Maybe we'll start with Harry.
Just so I'm clear. So one of the issues is that this district is the town center district, therefore the B&B model is not a fit, but it would be elsewhere in other districts in town.
Yes, so the bed and breakfast is more suitable in residential districts.
Right.
This home is legally non-conforming. It's been here for quite a while. The town centre district is more orientated towards the commercial uses. And when the district was created, a bed and breakfast was not envisioned as a use that they wanted to continue in that space.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Just looking in the land use bylaw for something that on one of your slides created some confusion for me. When you were talking about separation between dwelling and visitor, it was listed up there as between visitor and tourist home, but the application is for a visitor accommodation, tourist homes?
So a tourist home and dwelling unit are both residential.
Yep. Because they're not supposed to exist together, that's why the definition is like this?
The definition of visitor accommodation, or between the...
Is there a difference between tourist home and visitor accommodation? Or is it just because it's residential and commercial?
There are some nuances to it, but the main one is residential versus commercial between a tourist home and visitor accommodation.
And the reason why you've raised this definition and this issue about separation is because there isn't such a requirement on the commercial side?
There's a requirement here in the town centre to separate commercial and residential uses.
Right. Okay, that provides the clarity. Thank you. My other question, which I hope is not too much of a rabbit hole, this home, residential home, is in a land use district that's probably not typical for residential homes. I know there are a couple of other homes inside that district. But the property adjacent to this one actually has a direct control designation that's related to a tourist home, the Mallard Alley Guest House. Is that something that, yes, that one.
Yeah.
So obviously I don't know the history of that one, but it raised the question for me, given that you stated that what the applicant is going after is more like a bed and breakfast, did you talk to them about potentially a rezoning application as opposed to an application for a visitor accommodation?
Yes,
Okay. And,
they did not choose to go down that
okay.
route.
I may have other questions, but that's good for now. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Can you just clarify for me that in order to be considered visitor accommodation property, that a number of amenities are required? So I know it's in the definition of visitor accommodation, but they could have chosen any variety of amenities, but they have to have at least two, is that correct?
Yes, so just part of the second part of the definition for visitor accommodation, suites of more than one room, and I would contend that there's more than one room in this application. Two or more of the following services shall be provided: eating establishment, drinking establishment, room service, public convention room, or laundry service. And so two of those would need to be provided. They selected the drinking establishment, and I believe the laundry service as their two of preference.
And the two that they proposed were reviewed by planning and determined that they don't meet the criteria?
The drinking establishment has its own set of regulations, in particular serving the alcoholic beverages, needing to provide the parking would be two of those. And so as it's a listed use, that has additional regulations that need to be met.
So the
by the applicant.
drinking establishment is not exclusively for the guests of the visitor accommodation? Is that definition of drinking establishment is for the public?
Yes.
So not just for the people that are staying
Right.
in the building?
Right.
And to make it public, there would have to be some things provided to meet the application for the liquor and gaming?
They would need to provide approval in principle, is the wording in the bylaw from the AGLC
Right.
as part of the application, and the parking that I mentioned on site, and provide alcoholic beverages for the consumption to the general public.
So when you provide alcoholic beverages, that's like a full bar, right? I mean, you have to have bar amenities, you have to have security, I suppose, for the whole space that you're using that for, right?
That would principally be managed by AGLC. We don't have any regulations or overview on that part of the layout. The bylaw just talks to the general public and the serving of alcoholic beverages.
Okay. But you said that there is no delineation on this particular floor plan to show exactly where that would be?
It was not shown so that the area could be calculated for parking purposes,
Okay.
as it's on a square meter basis.
So that's what you needed from your perspective for the parking?
Yes.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Thanks. I have one question, and it has to do with the same thing. Can you explain a little bit more about the accommodation containing suites of more than one room? What's one room? Does that, for instance, include a bathroom? Is that two rooms? Or I'm thinking of a typical hotel or motel I might stay in, and how many rooms that might have.
For sure. I would apply that the intention there is more so of the bedrooms, but it's not necessarily clear, and I don't believe we have a definition of room in the bylaw. But I would I've applied it in a manner that there are 2 rooms, being bedroom 1 and bedroom 2, rather than a bathroom pushing applicants over that threshold.
Thank you. The context was in a typical hotel, I think of, I have a room.
Right.
Which in a typical hotel would mean perhaps that this applies in a typical hotel as well.
It
yeah,
may very well do, but therefore it would probably apply all the time. It's to have an open plan hotel room would be unusual.
Okay. I think I understand. Thanks. Are there any other questions?
I'm trying to find it, but I can't right now. But I understand this property right now is non-compliant. Can you tell us where it's non-compliant? Point that out.
So the dwelling unit that exists on the property is no longer a listed use because the definition, the listed uses, I may not have included it here. My apologies. Dwelling unit, and then it has in brackets, not located below the first floor, and so the home as it stands would be no longer listed in the district, as it's only a 1-story structure, and so it's non-conforming in the sense that it's the dwelling unit is not listed in the district, in the town centre district.
Hello. I'd just like to add some further clarity on that use description. So the existing property has a single-family detached residential dwelling on it. That was the use which was in place pre-development of the town center district. That use is no longer a use within the district, so therefore it's legal non-conforming. But that would be the use if it was found within like an R1 district. Essentially, it'd be a single-family detached home. Just to provide some further clarity on the use.
I guess further to that, when you look at, and I'm not sure exactly because we don't have a real property report, but it appears on the one diagram that some of the outbuildings are actually not necessarily on the property, and then also that it's encroaching probably on the, no, you gotta go back one more. Is that the one?
I think the last plan there showed it pretty good.
Okay, because we didn't have that plot plan.
So this was the. This is the mouse.
I do believe you're referring to the shed here. If you can see up on the screen, I have it highlighted there in red, and likely a little bit of this existing garage shown here.
Yes.
Those are all fair points. However, that is not a concern of the application for us right now. Those are all, developments that have been approved and have been there for quite some time.
Okay.
Not so much a concern here. The concern is about called the proposed use and the nature of the use and how it's being undertaken.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, one more over here.
You've given us a list of standard conditions that would be included if the board decides to uphold the appeal. And in those list of conditions, there are several items related to the variances where the language you've used is should rather than shall. I think it was under a title of planning guidance as opposed to an actual condition.
The advisory?
Yeah, advisory comments, right. So moving parking, removing the accessory building, and removing fencing specifically. What is the town's expectation, given that you've used the word should? Is that something that could be incorporated into the development permit to require those things? Or like why are they listed in there as should instead of shall?
So advisory comments, it's part of an approved Schedule A, not conditions, they're just bringing it to the attention of the I bring it to the attention of the applicant and would not be enforceable in terms of down the track non-compliance with the approval, and so that's why should is used, as it's not an enforceable condition of approval.
And you wouldn't want to make those an enforceable condition?
No.
No. So it's just to raise the issue and document it?
For attention,
Yeah.
yes.
Okay. That's it.
Any other questions from the board? No. Richard, I have one going back to the discussion about the bed and breakfast. Did I hear you say that there had been a bed and breakfast in this location at one time?
Not to my knowledge.
Oh, okay. Sorry. I misunderstood. Thank you. If that's all the questions, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
So next up would be the appellant or the appellant's agent. Please come up to the mic and remember to provide a name at some point written down. While that technology is being loaded, just remind anybody who might have a cell phone on just to make sure it's off. Just don't want those ringing, please.
The laser pointer's on if you need to, instead of using the mouse. Thanks.
Good afternoon. My name again is Sarah Jones, and I'm speaking on behalf of the appellants. Thank you to the members of the board for hearing our appeal today. So how do I hit next? There we go. So I'd like to go over just brief introductory remarks, and then I'll address each of the 4 points that the development officer had cited as reasons for refusal, and then how, in our opinion, it does conform with the land use bylaw, and then just a brief conclusion. So first, I'll just speak briefly to the questions you guys were just discussing about the legal non-conforming use. So the single-family dwelling is not a permitted use anymore in the town, but there is a permitted use for dwelling units in mixed-use buildings. So if this were to be approved, then it's actually more compliant for both uses. And the purpose of the town center district is to provide for a broad range of commercial, entertainment, cultural, residential uses in mixed-use buildings, and a focal point for community business and civic activities. So our position is that if this were to be approved, it brings the property more in alignment with the purpose of the district. So since a visitor accommodation is a permitted use, the bylaw states that the development authority shall approve all applications if they meet the provisions of the bylaw, and shall is stated in the bylaw to be a mandatory compliance. So the reasons for approval or for refusal, again, were the definition of the visitor accommodation, the additional services, separation of unit uses, and then architectural and design standards and landscaping. So for the definition, as mentioned previously, the definition states that visitor accommodation means a building or group of buildings not intended for residential use. But the way they're interpreting the word building is not in accordance with the land use bylaw. If we were to interpret building to only mean a complete detached home or structure like that, then if we follow that logically, the reason we're here today is because they applied for a development permit, and a development permit is required where they're going to undertake a development. And a development means a change of use of a building. So if they're not changing use of the entire building, they don't need a development permit, and we don't need to be here. also, building is actually a defined term in the land use bylaw, and it's intentionally quite broad, and it means anything constructed or placed on, in, over, or under land, but does not include a highway, public roadway, or bridge forming part of a highway. So anything on the land can be a building. It doesn't have to be a detached structure, a detached home. And if you even look at the exclusions there, does not include a highway, public roadway, bridge forming part of a highway. Those are very specific exclusions, which makes it appear that it should be interpreted very broadly. So again, there's that plan of the separation of uses there, and the portion in yellow is the building that they are applying to get approved, and it is not intended for residential use unless it meets the definition. And just to further that point, the land use bylaw states that the Interpretation Act applies for interpreting the provisions of the land use bylaw, and according to the Interpretation Act, definitions in an enactment are applicable to the entire document, including the section containing definitions. So that broad definition of building should be applied to the use of the word building in the definition of visitor accommodation. I also wanted to mention, they'd brought up bed and breakfasts, and there are other mixed-use allowances in other districts and in other definitions, and there are a lot of similar definitions, but just because there is another definition that's similar does not mean that they don't meet the requirements of visitor accommodation. And part of the definition of the of visitor accommodation says that with respect to the additional services, and I'll get into that in more detail later, but it does say that they may provide the additional services, not shall, in the main part of the definition. And in the written submissions from the development officer, it says that this means that they must aim to provide those services, and that's a misinterpretation because may is not supposed to provide any direction or guidance. It is strictly an option. Another thing that should be kept in mind is that the definition of visitor accommodation shouldn't be read in a vacuum, but we need to consider the entire context of the land use bylaw and how it's used elsewhere in different districts and in different sections of the bylaw. So I've got a couple of examples here. In section 9.6.05, this is the specific use with respect to visitor accommodations. It says visitor accommodation shall not be allowed to be located on the same floor of a multi-story residential building containing residential dwelling units or tourist homes. So if it's not allowed to be on the same floor of a residential building, then presumably it can be located on different floors, or if it's not allowed in a multi-story, presumably in a single story it could be, or else there's no reason to be that specific. And 9.6.06, a building which contains visitor accommodation units and residential dwelling units, providing separate entrances. So that again contemplates that there could be a building that contains both units. And then looking at some other districts, the GD and GD2 districts, buildings used for dwelling accommodation and visitor accommodation. Then BVTC and BVTT specifically say dwelling units, tourist homes, visitor accommodations may occupy the same building. And yes, these are different districts, and each district can have their own restrictions on there, but they're all operating off of that same general definition of visitor accommodation. So principle of fairness, it wouldn't make sense to say that the definition means that they can't be in the same building for only the town center district. And then, so this provision in the town center district was brought up as argument 3 for refusal of the application, saying that dwelling units and commercial units are allowed on the same floor as long as there's a separation of units or uses. So if commercial uses in this context does include visitor accommodation, as they are suggesting, then it follows that they are allowed to be on the same floor in the same building in certain circumstances. And then just from a practical perspective, there is a benefit to allowing the residential use to be located in the same building as a visitor accommodation. And this was brought up in some of the written submissions as well, some concerns about nuisance related to having short-term accommodations, noise, things like that. So if you have the owner living in the building and able to monitor and manage that, that can reduce the risk of nuisance. And given that the proximity to other residential properties, I think it's important, especially in this development, for there to be a reduction of nuisance complaints. So then I think the question shouldn't be whether they are allowed in the same building, but under what circumstances would they be allowed in the same building. And my opinion is that we should be looking at the district themselves and what the specific requirements are under the district. And there is no specific reference to visitor accommodation, but there is this provision that keeps coming up about dwelling uses and commercial uses being in the same building. And the requirements there are that there be a separation of uses and separate entrances. My understanding is that the separate entrances is pretty clear and not in dispute, and I'll get to the separation of uses when we get to point 3. And also I already talked about that, sorry. So for the additional services, there was that optional may include additional services in the main part of the definition, but then there is a second part that does say that it shall have 2 or more of the services, but this is conditional on there being suites of more than 1 room. And this application does not have any suites that have more than 1 room. There are 2 separate suites, and they're each 1 room. So this provision doesn't apply. And so the application did include an application for a drinking establishment, and I just want to clarify that we're not seeking the drinking establishment to be approved. We're only seeking approval for the visitor accommodation because, in our opinion, they're not required to have that secondary service. And the reason that it was included at all previously was a result of some miscommunications between my clients and the development officers, and they were under the mistaken impression that they were required to provide 2. And they were also under the impression that just having coffee and tea was a drinking establishment. So we're not trying to prove that they are serving alcohol and have a liquor license. I also just wanted to bring up that the land use bylaws are undergoing revisions, and these revisions have been approved and they come into effect in April. And the section about those additional uses and that confusing provision about suites with more than 1 room is removed entirely. So if that's the reason that this is rejected, then basically we're telling the clients that they should just come back in 3 months and they'll be approved. And that just seems like a waste of time and resources. So onto the separation of uses. So the proposal is that they would be separated by a locked door, and physical separation isn't defined in the land use bylaw. Door isn't defined in the land use bylaw, but just Webster's dictionary definition of a door does say that it is a barrier, and a barrier definition is a material that blocks passage. So that seems pretty clearly a physical separation, and just in other contexts and other examples, any condo building or apartment, all of the units are only separated by locked doors, and typically I I certainly wouldn't think I have no physical separation between myself and my neighbors. And someone had mentioned hotel rooms before. I know I've stayed in hotels where there are adjoining rooms, but if you don't rent out both of them, they rent them to separate parties, and they're only separated by a locked door. So this is to the satisfaction of the development authority. But I think, especially given that it's a permitted use, that satisfaction needs to be reasonable. And I don't think it's reasonable to say that a locked door is not satisfactory in this circumstance. And again, with the changes to the land use bylaw, that's not even going to be concerned 3 months from now. That has been removed completely. It used to apply to dwelling units and tourist homes must be separated from commercial uses, but that's changing to only tourist home needs to be separated from commercial uses. So dwelling units will have no restriction from being separated from commercial uses. The comments relating to pedestrian-oriented streetscape and the architectural and urban design standards. I would like to point out that they said that what they're concerned about is the use and things like encroachments and things like that. They're not concerned about that. And yet they're making fences and those types of things a reason for refusal. Also, pedestrian-oriented streetscape is not a defined term. There's some examples of what might help it look more like a pedestrian-oriented streetscape, but there's no clear absolute guidelines or checklist to say what needs to be included, what can't be included. And I wasn't able to find anything that specifically said there shouldn't be any fences or anything about informal parking. And those are the specific reasons that he mentioned, as well as accessory dwellings. There was nothing like that in the urban design guidelines. Also, a lot of the examples here, sidewalks, street lighting, things like that, that's for the public land, and that's not something under my client's control. She can't go and extend the sidewalk or put in new street lights, and it is consistent with the rest of the street here. The width of the sidewalk and the street lamps and all of that is, in my opinion, appropriate for this street. And then with respect to fences, from what my read of Section 12, the Architectural and Urban Design Guidelines, it actually encourages fences. So it talks about softening the visual impact of buildings, having deciduous trees to shade buildings, having fences to buffer the street from vehicles, and screening less attractive elements, screening land uses which detract from the aesthetic objectives of the area, like screening the parking and vehicle storage areas, fencing to discourage loitering and vandalism, and hedges or other vegetation planted in front of the fence. And there is a hedge in front of the fence there. And then just going back for a second, that initial section 3.1.5.1 about the pedestrian-oriented streetscape, it did also mention use of glass and doors. So there are a lot of large glass windows and doors in the building as well. With respect to the parking, because he had mentioned that the parking was informal, there was nothing in the bylaws about having formal parking that I could find anyways, in the sections that he referred to, and it sounded more like they were leaning towards informal parking and talking about not having the parking dominate the lands and having permeable paving materials, grass or gravel paving. Doesn't sound like formal parking to me. And if you guys don't agree and think that it does not appear to be a pedestrian-oriented streetscape, then I think this is properly the subject of a variance and not an automatic refusal. And just some of the provisions relating to granting variances here is having a public benefit, having site conditions that would constrain the development, a neighborhood benefit, and not unduly interfering with amenities or neighbors. Public benefit, in my opinion, the fencing and the trees and all of that does have the public benefits listed in Section 12 of reducing loitering, vandalism, providing shade, and just making it a safer area. So visitor accommodation is a commercial use, but we're not talking about a storefront or a coffee shop or something like that. It's a place where people are going to sleep and keep their belongings. So it is important that it does have more security than an open commercial building. Community benefit, I think, because they are bringing it more in compliance with the purpose of the district, and bringing now both of the uses would be permitted uses under the district. I think there's a benefit there. We haven't seen any objections or any claims that it's interfering with the amenities of the area or the safety of anyone. As I mentioned, I think the fences actually promote safety and not interfere with it. Under Section 12, it says the Planning Commission may vary the standards for specific projects if it will result in better design solution than strict application. And I think from the points I mentioned before, it does constitute a better design to retain the fences and the landscaping as it currently is. So, in my opinion, it does meet the provisions of the land use bylaw, and so because it is a permitted use, it must be approved. And I think it's very important that the land use bylaw be a document that can be relied upon, and the way that it's been interpreted here, I think, causes a lot of misinterpretation and inconsistencies throughout the bylaw that make it impossible for anyone to rely on in their applications. And especially when we're dealing with a permitted use, having such a broad discretion to say that, oh, because there's a fence, we're going to deny the application completely and things like that, it makes it sound a lot more like a discretionary use to me. And the more we kind of restrict the permitted uses, that's going to have an effect on the marketability of properties if a permitted use is not actually treated like a permitted use. So thank you for your time, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. I'll just open up to everybody. Whoever has a question first, please speak up. Any? Harry, I'll go through here. No? No questions? Go ahead, please.
I've got a question for you. I know you're trying to make a delineation between a commercial suite, and they're wanting to rent one room with a common area that doesn't have a drinking establishment as an amenity. I think you clarified that they're not going to apply for a GLC permit because what they want to use as an amenity is just a coffee tea area. What you seem to be describing is a bed and breakfast. And what makes it the commercial visitor accommodation use is the inclusion of those public amenities and the inclusion of things that make it more of a commercial space versus a bed and breakfast. And defining that one room as a visitor accommodation space, but taking out the amenities makes it sound to me like a bed and breakfast. That was my observation from your presentation. So would you care to comment on that?
Sure. So I think, again, there's an inference being made that is not supported by the wording of the bylaw. It does specifically say may include the following amenities, and may is, there is an interpretation provision in the bylaw that specifically says that may is optional, and I can find the exact.
And may is a list of 6 things, but you have to pick 2 of them.
No, so there's 2 lists with the amenities. So the first part of the definition says may include and list the amenities, and doesn't say you have to pick 2. And then there's a second provision that says if the majority of the suites that you are renting out contain more than 1 room, then you shall have 2 of the following amenities. And the wording specifically says it's conditional on the suites having more than 1 room. And if that wasn't the intention, then that shouldn't have been worded that way. And again, the land use bylaws are removing that requirement entirely, so I don't see a move towards them wanting to clarify that to require those amenities. It seems to be moving away from a requirement for those amenities.
And it's a commercial use that you're going for, but the sense of the property is a bed and breakfast, just from the scale.
There are similarities, but there is no scale restriction in the definition of visitor accommodation or anywhere in the provisions of visitor accommodation, and I don't think it's appropriate to make those inferences and read in restrictions that are not there. Yes, a bed and breakfast is similar, but that doesn't mean that just because it's similar to something else, it doesn't qualify for the permitted use in the district. Bed and breakfast also says that they have to provide breakfast every day or a meal, which we're not applying for. So they're not exactly the same. There are some differences, and I haven't scanned the bylaw for all of the restrictions with relation to bed and breakfast because that's not a permitted or discretionary use in the district and not what they're applying for. But from the actual wording of the visitor accommodation, if we're not extrapolating and not carrying over inferences and reading in extra wording, they do meet the definition as written.
Thank you.
Yes, please.
I know you pointed out that the changes to the bylaw are going away from the 1-room, 2-room suite issue, but just for clarity, if I recall, administration presented the application as 1 visitor accommodation with 2 bedrooms, so you'd be renting to 1 person at once, but then you presented that it was 2 separate rooms, so I'm assuming that's 2 separate clients?
Correct.
Okay, so that is what the application is for?
Yes.
2 separate rooms?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Have you changed the application?
That was my understanding of what the
Well, if you
application.
look at the original application, it says, purpose of development, residential plus tourist home, number of units, 1. So it is, they've applied for 1 with 2 rooms, is what, just to say, you know, that's what it was applied for.
Okay, I apologize for the inconsistency. I know there was some changes with the discussions before I was involved. It was a tourist home application at one point. There was the drinking establishment added on because my clients aren't lawyers. They're not town council. Reading these bylaws, as we can see today from the misinterpretations here, can be a little bit difficult to follow, but from my conversations and my instructions from my client, they are renting those rooms out separately.
I guess while I'm at it, also the existing use, which I really don't understand, is residential commercial. Is there actually a commercial component to the existing residence?
No, that was a mistake, and I believe, apologies if I am misrepresenting this, but I believe they said that they had asked someone at the town what they should put there, and it was zoned for residential and commercial, and so that's what they put. But if I had filled out that application, that's not how I would have filled it out.
Any other questions from members? I'll have a few, and I'll ask you again if you think of some more. First of all, the issue you raised, the tourist home option. It is a discretionary use in that district, tourist homes, not
Correct.
B&Bs, but tourist homes. What happened to that discussion about, why did this not end up as a tourist home application?
There was a requirement for tourist homes that they did not meet with this application. To keep things moving, do you want me to maybe note this and I'll look up my notes, and then when we do the summary, I can respond instead of wasting everyone's time flipping through paper?
That's probably a good idea. Yeah, that's fine. The reason I ask is because going to Councillor Sanderson's comment, it may not be a B&B, but it could be a tourist home, right? If it's not visitor accommodation, perhaps. I don't know. But yes, if you get another chance to speak, and if you raise that or answer that, that'd be wonderful.
Great.
The next question or point I'd make is regarding that physical separation of the door, because I think I understand what you're saying in terms of the separation and condominium and whatnot. But if I'm in my condominium in an apartment building or an apartment or a hotel room for that matter, I control the access to the door. And then if I'm in a room that has that share option with the room next door, there are typically two doors. And so neither party controls the door. And in this case, with one door, one of the two parties would presumably have control of the lock. So it's not a real permanent barrier. It's a flexible barrier. One party can easily go between the two areas by unlocking it. I don't know if you have a comment about that, but I see a control issue with regards to separation.
So I do understand what you're saying, but I think there's no situation where the owner would not be able to ever access the visitor accommodation. Whether they use that door or they go out and use the separate entrance, they have to be able to get in there. When people leave, they have to clean it, things like that. So they're always going to have control, in a sense, to be able to access that area, and they need to be able to because they are the owners of the property.
Okay. The next one was, if the board decides that this is one unit with several rooms, then the requirement to have those extra services clicks in. And you, in your written material, suggested room service and laundry service might be provided as options, not the drinking facility. But what would those look like if they were perchance required and provided?
The laundry is in here. So there is a laundry area already in the establishment on the visitor accommodation side. And the room service, so they could potentially set up a list of food services that they would offer and times that they would be available, and then people could order the food. Room service is not defined anywhere in the land use bylaw. There are no specific requirements for what they would need to do there.
Okay. Next one, if it's a visitor accommodation, you have a requirement probably for a sign. I'm pretty sure it's in there for a sign. Have your clients given any thought to what that sign might look like?
I know they said that they would be providing signs. I don't have any pictures or things like that. I think in the conditions set out in the proposed approval from the development officer, it says that the signage would require a separate permit, which I think is appropriate.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions? No. Thank you very much. And just your name there, if you'd write it down. I think that's all we have for you.
Okay, thank you. I'll get back to you on that one question.
Please. The next up is those people who might be in attendance and who want to speak in support of the appeal. So in support of what you've just heard. Anybody who wishes to speak in support? I'll ask 3 times. Make sure I don't miss anybody. Anybody who might wish to speak in support of the appeal? Jolene, do we have any written material in support of the appeal?
We do not, no.
Okay,
No.
thank you. Thanks. So now would be the opportunity for those who might be in attendance who wish to speak in support of the development officer in the town's position, refusing the application. Is there anybody who wishes to speak in that regard? Again, 3 times. Anybody speaking in support of the town's position? Last chance. Anybody speaking in support of the town's position? No. And Jolene, do we have anything there?
No.
Okay. Thanks. The next opportunity to speak is neither in support or in opposition, but with something pertinent to say. Is there anybody who would like to speak? Yes, ma'am. Please come up and tell us who you are and what you'd like to say.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you. My name is Beth Vandervoort, and I live at 701 Mallard Alley, the direct control portion of property right next door. I guess a couple of comments. Number one, it was only because I opened my mail to pay bills on Monday or Tuesday that I found out that the letter had been sent to me on December 19th. So a very short period of time in order to respond or to give any kind of information. And also as the executive director for the downtown BIA, business improvement area, and that property is actually part of the zone. I may have had some other comments regarding the application. I guess as the property owner next door, our only comments, my husband's and I comments it's a very busy area, and parking is at a premium. And parking, if they're going to have it as 2 rentals, each bedroom rented out to 2 separate people, it's important to have the parking available for them, for those 2 people. We quite often in our property, we rent it out as 1 unit. I only ever have 1 person renting, like 1 group or whatever at a time. It's a 2-bedroom unit. And I quite often will end up with 3 vehicles because of people coming with family or et cetera, et cetera. So I guess that was the only thing. It's just to take it under consideration. It's neither for or against, but just to be cognizant of the area that this property is in, the busyness of it, and the parking for that area. Other than that, I don't have any other comments, unless you have one for me.
Does anybody have a question?
Okay.
No?
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anybody else who would like to speak, neither in support or against, but on the matter? 3rd time. Anybody else who would want to speak? Neither in support nor against, but something pertinent, presumably? No. Jolene, do we have any other material?
No, we do not.
Okay. Thank you. Just ask the board, I guess. So we've heard all of the material. Does anybody need a recess? Do we want to ask for other material? Do we want to go in camera and discuss anything of importance? No? Okay, thank you. So I think we'll just proceed. So next up, administration will be asked to provide any clarification or closing comments.
Great, thank you. There are a few clarifications that I would like to make here. And I will speak to the comment around the tourist home and why that was not pursued. So with the use of a tourist home, it's either you have the option to use it as a residence, or you have the option to rent it out. Because there is no option, to split the home and just rent out half. It's either or. You're either doing a full rental or it's a residential unit, which at some point in time you might decide, hey, I'm going to rent it out. So that's why that was not pursued. just to provide some clarity.
Thank you.
On that one. With respect to, it's called the delineation of the units, from what I'm hearing and what administration was expressing is that there is a concern with the delineation. Again, this goes back to separating the uses and creating that clear delineation, because without the delineation and with the access through the units, what we're seeing is, yes, it's functioning as a bed and breakfast. If there were clear delineation, with a solid wall structure, that could be viewed a little bit differently, but from what we're seeing here is that this really falls under the use of a bed and breakfast, which, as administration, we have the authority to look at the uses and fit those into, the best use within the land use bylaw. So there is a discretion for us to look at that, and when we look at that, that's where we see this use fitting in under our professional recommendation. With regards to formal parking requirements, there is a formal parking requirement with this. Whether it's a bed and breakfast, whether it's a visitor comm, Section 8 of land use bylaw specifies specific parking requirements which need to be shown on a plan, which we had not received. For a visitor accommodation use, it's 1 vehicle stall per unit. So keep that in mind as well. With regards to the comments around pedestrian streetscapes and a pedestrian-oriented streetscape, the mention of windows being existing on the building, that's all a fair point. But if you're looking at land use bylaw and what the expectations are of a pedestrian streetscape, it's really enhancing the frontage of the street. All the windows, the fences, which are up, are all existing. They're not really adding a presence to enhancing the streetscape. It's not to say that the fences which exist are grounds for refusal, but it's something which is missing from the application itself. So it's something that, we would always look at as the planning department. So please keep that in mind. The biggest thing here is that the information we've received is not sufficient for us to look at and determine that, yes, it is meeting land use bylaw requirements. What we're seeing is an inconsistency in the application of uses, the request for the uses proposed. And one very important factor here to look at is the application form, which has been provided as part of the application. That forms the essence of the application. The uses described on that do not reflect what's being asked for today, so I'd also like for you to keep that in mind. And also to consider as well, when we're looking at the adaptive reuse of existing buildings, it's not that we're opposed to a building which is a single family home within the town center to be used as a visitor accommodation, but when we're looking at that, we need to be consistent in the application. We've had other meetings with the select few, it's called single family homes, that are left in the TC, and in the interim, they are looking at full visitor accom until they have the means to come forward with a mixed-use building. So I would like you also to give that some consideration as well. Beyond that, I think that will answer all the clarities that were required here. If you do have any other questions, totally happy to answer.
You have just said that the application you received was not sufficient for you to determine if the use complies with the bylaw or if you know exactly what they're trying to apply for. Is there not an opportunity for you to reject the application instead of refusing the development? Or continue to work with the applicant until you had enough information to make that decision?
Yeah, in the process and how that went down.
Sure. So that second slide that I provided, there was a fair bit of time between when they first applied in August and when a decision was issued in December, so there was a fair bit of back and forth. The application was amended via email and that in going the visitor accommodation route, and we did previously mention about the other options that were available to the applicant that wouldn't have ended up in this position, the bylaw amendment route. And so once the visitor com was selected and that could not be approved in the layout with the uses that they selected, it was determined that that was time to make a decision on the application rather than either continue or refuse for not enough.
Any other questions of the town? I see now. I have a few, please.
Yeah.
First, the land use bylaw that's in process. Where is it? Is it had third reading and the active date's in April, or is it working its way to an April deadline?
Yes. So the new land use bylaw was approved on December 10th by council.
Third reading?
Third reading.
Thank you.
However, it's called the written clause in the admin section for the effective date of that bylaw to come into full effect on April 1st. So until that date, we will not be using that, that bylaw.
Thank you. Second one, the bed and breakfast possibility.
Yep.
When I read that definition earlier, it seems to imply that you have to serve breakfast, or at least one meal. It doesn't have to be breakfast, but the definition says, and serve one meal. Is that how the town interprets it, or is there any flexibility on that? Because it didn't seem from the application they wanted to serve any food.
Right. Give me 1 second. I'm just pulling up the definition here right now.
And I recognize it's not a use anyway. So.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the way the definition reads is that means an ancillary commercial use operated by the permanent resident of the dwelling and providing a maximum accommodation of 3 guest rooms to a maximum of 6 persons or pillows for periods of 14 days or less, with 1 meal provided by the operator to the registered guests on a daily basis. So it's suggesting that, like 1 meal be provided. However, that is a clause of the LUB, which is not something that we can, necessarily regulate. So I'd also ask that you keep that in mind.
Okay. Parking. So we've heard that there are 2 units, and I understand that a dwelling would be 2 units as well, so or parking stalls, not units really. So the need here would be 4 units if we were to choose to, for parking stalls, sorry, if we were to choose to approve this?
That is correct. So you'd need 2 for the residential dwelling, and then you need 2 for the visitor accommodation units. Okay. It should be 1 for each.
And last question, regarding the sign, I asked about the sign. I seem to recall in the land use bylaw in the TC district, there would be a requirement for a sign that would meet the town center, I guess, district requirements. What would that be like, if we may?
Right. So that's a whole separate process. That's not something which would form the decision of the planning department on the specific application. That's a simple signage application which would come into the planning department after the approval of this, meeting the requirements for signage, relatively simple to do. Again, not really the focus of what we're here to speak about, so I would just like to make that clear.
And I have no idea what my compatriots are thinking, but, and I haven't made a conclusion yet, but if we were to proceed and to allow this, we could put on a condition saying thou shalt apply for a sign. And that would satisfy that.
Yeah, that's a standard requirement of development though. So even if it weren't to be captured on there, the expectation would still be there for that to come in.
Thank you. Any other questions? I think I'm done. Thank you very much. Yeah. The appellants now have an opportunity for their rebuttal.
Thank you for answering that question for me about the tourist home. hopefully that answers your question. In terms of conversation about parking, so formal requirements for parking, I understand they're saying just means the, thank you, the amount of parking, which was not clear that's what they were talking about in the rejection. There are 4 parking stalls provided, so it does meet those requirements. And if they wanted a different form of plan or something like that, presumably they would have needed that for tourist home or visitor accommodation, and they had months to clarify that with the clients. They never indicated to them that they had insufficient information. And my understanding is that my clients had asked for guidance on filling out the application, and had asked multiple times if they had the right documentation and information provided, and they had significant delays in getting responses, and a lot of the responses were simply copy-pasting provisions of the bylaw without explaining what they were actually looking for. So my client's understanding, and my understanding from the notice of refusal, was that it wasn't a matter of them not providing enough information. If there was information missing, I would have liked to have seen that on the notice of refusal so we could have had a chance to respond to it, or even preferably for that to have been brought up before they issued their decision. Yeah, so that's my comments.
Any questions from the board? Yeah, go ahead, please.
Further to your question about parking, I'm just looking at this drawing you guys sent in, and it's not very clear, but it looks to me like there's 2 parking stalls in front of the garage for the dwelling and 1 parking stall for the visitor accommodation. That looks like what was presented. Am I missing something? Because it looks like, is that a 2-car garage? Yeah, okay. So there's actually 5 parking stalls potentially.
Yeah, so there's more than 4. I think they said there would be up to 6.
6
parking. Oh.
Thank you.
Sorry, I can't find the photo on here. It's in there somewhere.
I didn't turn that on. Sorry.
Any other questions?
Any other question? Yes.
In your earlier presentation, you mentioned that an amenity that you could consider providing would be room service. Wouldn't room service need to be provided from a commercial kitchen under Alberta health regulations, as opposed to a B&B meal that's provided out of someone's home? I mean, room service would have some standard procedures, I would imagine.
It does not under the land use bylaw. There are no requirements.
But there would be, if you were serving food under those conditions where you were delivering it to units, wouldn't Alberta Health Services have some requirements or regulations? Not the land use bylaw, but Alberta Health.
I'm not sure why the restrictions would be more than for a bed and breakfast.
And bed and breakfasts are licensed with the conditions that are presented with a residential unit that is facilitating an accessory suite or room.
Mm-hmm. So you're saying a bed and breakfast needs to have a commercial kitchen?
No, I'm saying that a bed and breakfast is part of a residential unit that is offering a stay in that residential building, versus a commercial operation, which is providing room service, which is more of a commercial nature.
Well, they would have to provide it legally, so if there is a permit required, they would have to do that and look into that. But from my understanding, they don't need a commercial kitchen to do that. But I don't think they need to provide those additional services at all. I don't think that's a requirement under the land use bylaw.
Okay, but you had considered it. That was one suggestion that you made that was not in the application, so that's why I'm raising it.
Yeah, I understand. I just didn't quite dig into what licenses they would need for that, but yes, they would have to provide it legally, so they would apply for those licenses if required.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? No? I have none. Thank you. Do we agree that we've heard enough from everybody? We can declare the hearing, this first one, closed?
Thank you.
I think. Let me just review my notes to make sure I haven't missed anything. Yeah. So, pardon? Yes, I do. Thank you. So, the question is this, and it's to the appellants. Do you believe that you've had a fair and impartial hearing today? Thank you. Anything else? You can keep me on track. It's all right. Thank you very much. With that, we'll close the first hearing. The second one will take place. We'll have maybe a 5-minute recess. Is that the board's wish? Yeah. So we'll recess for 5 minutes. That will be, let's come back at 25 to 6 and for the second hearing. Thank you all for attending. Thanks for your presentations. Okay, good evening, everybody. You've sat through the first one, most of you, but we'll start again and go through the process very much in the same manner we did the first time. I'm Greg Birch. I'm the chair tonight of for this public hearing. Sorry, SDAB hearing. Sorry, and I will ask the members to introduce themselves again.
Harry Scott.
Jill Jameson.
Rochelle Harding.
Vi Sanford, Town Councillor.
Thank you. And Jolene is Jolene Noel.
Jolie Noel, the clerk.
Yeah. So this is the second appeal hearing. I'm sure you all know about it. It's BE2019-034, the stop order for the non-conforming tourist home. We don't have to adopt the agenda anymore, so I'll ask the development officer to introduce this one in the same manner as before, giving indication of the notice that was issued.
Yes, good afternoon again. My name is Richard Williams, and today I am the Land Use Enforcement Officer before you, and I issued a stop order to a tourist home operating at 7 Bluegrass Ridge. And my apologies for that. So the statutory requirements, here I issued the stop order on November the 7th. It was mailed internationally, and I received a notification that it was picked up on November the 12th. Notice of appeal was submitted to the town on December the 12th. Letters of notification were mailed on December the 19th. It was advertised January the 2nd, 2020, and today is January the 9th, and I believe that the statutory requirements of the appeal have been met.
Thank you. I'd now ask the appellant and or an agent to come forward and just tell us who you are, please.
Members of the board, Jolene and Mr. Williams. My name is Alexander Stadnik. I am the appellant in this matter, and any questions that I need answered at this point in time?
Just the one, which is, well, I guess two. You received all the information you needed from the package, as far as you know?
Yes, I have.
Yeah. And you've heard the board introduce themselves. Do you have any objections to anyone sitting and hearing this?
Is anyone on the board related in any way to the members of the Board of Condominium Corporation 941-1407 Bluegrass Ridge HOA?
I don't know.
Nope.
Okay, then I have no objections.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks.
So, a little repetitive for those who sat through the first hearing, but this is a procedure. First, administration will make their presentation. Then the appellant will make their presentation in terms of the appeal. People who want to speak in support of the appeal go next. Then those who speak in support of the town follow. Lastly, those speaking in neither favor nor in opposition, but with something important they would like to say about the matter. The board will ask questions of clarifications along the way, as most of you saw in the last hearing. We'll then check internally with ourselves to make sure we think that we've had enough of the material covered. We don't need to recess, ask for more, go in camera or anything like that. And then we will close the hearing. Again, the law allows us to debate this in private afterwards, in closed session, and we have 15 days to make our decision. We try to get that done faster than that. We, of course, close the public hearing after we are satisfied that it is completed. Purpose today is to hear from you. You all have presumably an interest in this matter, and we'd like to hear from you on that. Our decision, of course, will be made on proper planning matters. Please ensure comments are directed to the board as they were with the previous hearing. If you turn off your cell phones, if anybody's got theirs on, please turn it off. And if you have a written document that you submit, I know we've received one ahead of the hearing from Julie Noel, but if you have any written material that you refer to and present, please give Jolene a copy. And finally, so that we get your name correctly spelled in the record, there's a pad over there in front of Jolene. Just write it down after you've spoken. And I think that's it. Everybody okay? Here we go. So the development officer, please outline your case.
Yes, thank you. So just go straight to the site context here of 7 Bluegrass Ridge. It's listed at the base of Silvertip, highlighted in red. You've got Silvertip Trail to the right and Palliser Trail and the Trans-Canada down in the bottom left. Just turn on the pointer. So I just want to provide an overview of the purpose of the stop order. Is the formal notice provided to the municipality to require a property owner to stop, remedy or take any other action to comply with the land use bylaw. It's how a municipality remedies a contravention of the land use bylaw and does not constitute an approval of a development in lieu of the development permit process as required under the land use bylaw. So principally before you is the contravention at this property is the operation of a tourist home, and it's defined as following: a temporary place to stay with or without compensation, and includes all vacation rentals of a dwelling unit. And there's some characteristics there that distinguish a tourist home from a dwelling unit, and they are the intent of the occupant to stay for a short-term vacation purpose rather than use the property as a residence. Commercial nature of a tourist home, the management or advertising, which is a key piece there, of the dwelling unit as a tourist home or vacation property, the use of a system of reservations, deposits, confirmations, credit cards, or other forms of electronic payment. And there's also a clause there that says this is not an exhaustive list that would constitute a tourist home, but they are a great starting point. And I would want to bring your attention that there is no minimum provided in that definition of the number of days which will constitute short-term, and that short-term is also not defined in the land use bylaw, and so there is a little bit of leeway there, and that's on purpose, which will become important shortly. And so this was the tourist home on advertising that was captured as part of the stop order. And this is page 2 here, the Silvertip Lodge, and in particular the minimum stay piece here is indicated by the advertising. There is more to this advertising, however those are the two main pages. So the online advertising is on VRBO, which is an online booking site, which stands for Vacation Rental by Owner. That's a primary part of the definition of a tourist home, the vacation piece. In particular, the website includes statements such as "Your perfect vacation awaits," "Your vacation is safe with us," and "Better vacations start here." The actual advertising of the home included the following statements: the Silvertip Lodge piece, "Your home in the Canadian Rockies, Banff Lake Louise." It offers exquisite amenities and luxurious surroundings to provide an ideal retreat for the sophisticated traveller. And traveller is key there, part of being on vacation. And then also the statement where contact the owner for availability and rate information, as they do not use the online calendar, indicating that the 30 days may be flexible if they are not using the calendar to book the home. As part of the online advertising, there was quite a few statements from previous guests who have enjoyed the home, and notably a few quotes here. "Most incredible home for a week for a family of 10. Would rent this house again in a heartbeat if we're only closer to New York. Wonderful home for a family vacation. Wonderful week together. We would definitely stay here again. Our best vacation ever. Should we consider another vacation in Banff area, we would love to rent this house again." All indications of a tourist home use. However, tourist homes are prohibited in all residential districts, including the R1 district, in which this property is located. In particular, the section in particular is 8.7.1.2, where it says the development or operation of a tourist home constitutes a commercial development and is prohibited in all residential districts, unless the use is explicitly provided for within the applicable land use district and a valid development permit is in place for the tourist home. And here's the home located in the R1 district, so the tourist home is not a listed use in the R1 district, and furthermore, you wouldn't be able to obtain a development permit for that use. Therefore, I issued a stop order to the property owner on November the 7th, and on or before December 12th, the property owner was ordered to take the following actions: provide the town with evidence that they have ceased all advertisement of the property as a tourist home, provide the town with evidence that they've cancelled all existing reservations to use the property as a tourist home, and to cease the use of the lands and buildings on the property as a tourist home going forward. So in conclusion, the dwelling unit was advertised as a vacation property / tourist home on a vacation website. The advertising is characteristic of a tourist home. Tourist homes are prohibited in residential districts, including the R1 district. The stop order to cease the non-conforming tourist home was issued correctly. And that concludes my presentation. If you have any questions for me,
Okay.
happy
Any
to answer.
questions from the members? I just have one question. After the notification and the requirement to essentially correct the matter, did you see any evidence that that was corrected?
There is some evidence, but I wouldn't want to give a definitive yes or no compliance answer. It could very well be changed, and that's why the third piece of that is cease the use and on an ongoing basis. And the first 2 points are to making sure that the matters that have previously happened at the property are remedied, but the third one is the most important, being to cease it from here on out.
Yes, go ahead, Matt.
You stated this is an R1 district. Now, there is a condo board that manages this parcel of land, so could you just describe the circumstance where this is a condo board?
Absolutely. It is certainly more unusual of an R1 district. When the land was developed, it was decided to make it a private road, which you can faintly see a line here. And so the road is actually private through this area, and that in part becomes the nature of the condominium, so that it's not public access. And so the condominium has this as common land, and then these are the private homes within it. So it's unusual to have that configuration, but it is a condominium within the town.
So there's a group that manages that parcel of
Exactly.
parcel of land.
The homeowners are all part of.
But the homeowners own the property.
Yes, they own the roadway, which forms part of
Okay.
which they would need to manage and so forth. And
Is that what we call bare land condominium?
I believe so.
Okay, all right. So that makes it a little bit different than the rest of the town, but none of that property is zoned tourist home
No,
or short-term rental?
no,
of any
it's
kind?
you still need to choose use or a district, I guess, when you come to develop land. And at that time, they chose to dictate it as R1. There's many other uses that could have been chosen, but that was what was settled on. There are other parts of Silvertip at the top that are a different district that allow for tourist homes, but
Different
this is
uses. Okay,
not that
good.
case.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
It's the appellant's turn, sir. Thank you.
So if you would have ever seen me operate a computer, you'd know why I'm not having any computer presentations here. But briefly, to clarify the Bearland condominiums, based on my understanding, the roadways of that particular neighborhood are very steep and narrow, and because they did not conform to town code, it was decided by the developer, Stone Creek Properties, to condominiumize it. And so the common properties are basically the roadway, and the lots are freehold. My wife and I are originally from Edmonton, and we relocated to Houston for what was supposed to be 2 years and turned out to more than 30. And we, wanting to maintain a connection to Canada, purchased our property in 1994. And in part, that was so that our children could maintain connections with their family in Alberta, and so that they could realize that there's a difference between being a Canadian and being an American. And I think we've been successful in that, as all 3 boys skate and can handle hockey sticks, and you view that as a metric. So after Hurricane Harvey hit us several years ago, there was some disagreement between myself and the Condominium Corporation, HOA, and starting in January of 2018, you have an email trail between myself and the Town of Canmore Enforcement Office, and that goes between January of 2018 and I believe August. And that was to get guidance from the Town of Canmore as to what constituted a permitted, acceptable use of my property. I submitted that in redacted form because this is a public hearing and that's public information. If the board wants an unredacted version or you want electronic copies, I'm more than happy to provide those. So based on my conversations between January and July or August of 2018, I received guidance from the Town of Canmore Enforcement Officer as to what was a legitimate use of the property, what was a tourist home, and what was not a tourist home. And on the basis of that information, I did proceed forward and feel that all of my use since that time, and certainly from the time of the stop order notification and summons, which is dated November 7th of 2019, my use has been conforming with Town of Canmore guidelines. Now, those emails are not to be found on the Town of Canmore server, and that is contrary to the record retention policy of the town. I've given you an email of my conversation with the data management officer. I feel that my use has been in conformance with this land use bylaw, and merely by looking at the point of advertising and not looking at the actual use, I don't think that is an acceptable interpretation of the bylaw. So I would ask that the bylaw be clarified, that we look at the use and property function, and look at the time of the summons, which is from November of 2019 to the present time. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Does the board have any questions?
So the summons was November 7th of 2019. So, and my conversations with the town were starting in, I think, mid-January of 2018. So after my conversations with the town, and certainly before the date of the summons, my use of this property was in conformity.
the correspondence you provided between yourself and the town of Canmore talks about the use of your home by friends and family.
Correct.
That's okay. That
Yeah.
makes sense. But we have evidence for advertising on a vacation website with some indication that people who are not friends and family potentially have rented the home for short-term rentals, and I believe you also have had a private website that
Sure.
that
Sure,
advertises.
but again, this was a bylaw, and I reached out to the town in order to be in compliance with the bylaw. And after my conversations with the town, I feel that I am in compliance, that this is advertised as a residence, and it's advertised as a long-term residence. And, people don't go on month-long vacations.
Okay, so have you rented your home for compensation for short-term rentals?
I have not rented the home for short-term rentals since the conversations I've had with the bylaw enforcement officer. And I have not rented my home for short-term rentals from November of 2019 forward, which is the period we're talking about at this hearing.
And one more question. Some of the evidence provided indicates that there was a stop order issued in 2011. Is that correct?
I can't recall that.
Okay. That's it. Thank you.
Any other questions?
So, thank you for those explanations. So what I'm hearing is that since you got a stop order, you have actually stopped doing it, but not before. So you were renting your home out, and there was an investigation on November 7th, is that correct?
I received
You received
notification on November
notification.
7th.
Okay.
And one of the points of that was that this home was listed on VRBO. And in compliance with that, I withdrew my advertisement on VRBO as of that time.
Okay. So after you got the stop order, you stopped. It's essentially what you're supposed to do, right?
Yes, but the advertisement quite clearly states that this is for long-term rentals. So is this action directed against long-term rentals, or is it more short-term vacation rentals?
Well, if people are saying that they had a great time over a weekend with 10 people in the house, that implies that you gave them a short-term rental. That was the agreement, right?
Right, but I don't know the date of that, and I believe that it does not fall during the time from the time that I sought guidance from the town of Canmore, which is in early 2018, moving forward.
From what I gather from that interchange or that exchange you had with the town of Canmore, they were suggesting that it's not illegal to rent your home out. It's just more that if you fulfill the needs of the community for a month-to-month rental where people are actually staying there for a longer period of time, that might satisfy the conditions.
So,
however,
okay.
VRBO doesn't give you that option. It's a short-term rental site.
Well, actually, the nature of work and travel is changing, and people don't necessarily go to vacation travel sites to book vacation travel. Let me give you an example. When my father was ill, I booked a house in Edmonton for what turned out to be his last Christmas, and we traveled as a family to Edmonton to stay close to his house. I booked that through HomeAway. I didn't consider that a vacation, and when we went up to Edmonton in February for his funeral, similarly, I booked a house through a HomeAway vacation rental site for a period of time to be close to my sister and attend the funeral. I don't consider that to be a vacation rental.
But if it's under 1 month, it's a short-term rental.
That would have been a short-term rental, but
Right.
I have not had short-term rentals. These rentals and the screen grab that you're providing me, the blocks on there are for a month at a time.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, no, wait, no. That was, she was okay. I guess
Okay.
my problem, sir, is that I see a thank you very much, your most incredible home for a week, for a family of 10, stayed July 2018. So, I question. Next thing I question, and I do use RBOs where they are allowed. This, they aren't. But I noticed that your rate is $250 average per night. Now, why would anyone in their right mind charge that for 30 days? Who is ever going to even contact you if they are going to do a minimum of 30 days for $250 a night?
I don't understand your question.
What was up here, and
Right.
it's $250 average per night.
Right.
Your minimum rental is 30 days.
30 nights, correct.
250 times 30,
Yes.
why would anyone ever phone you to, or contact you to rent for 30 days? I could stay at the Banff Springs for that.
So that's right. There hasn't been much activity since.
But that doesn't, to me, sir, having an average in there per day, signal to anyone that you're trying to rent this for 30 days only. That tells people that, no, this is short-term rentals and you're willing to maneuver it.
No, I would tell you that this was a way of listing the property by the listing agency, and this is not meant to solicit a night-by-night nor weekly rental. I quite clearly have there that the minimum rental is 30 days. And the booking calendar that you have produced shows that, you know, there is blocks of 30 days, and I believe there's...
You don't use that anyway. You've said that.
Well, that I have put because if we have family visiting, I don't put that on that calendar, so I don't want any conflicts with family. So, for example, my son is coming up with his friends at the end of March. I would not put that on the calendar, but, you know, that is the explanation for that.
Are there any other questions from the members? I have a couple. Just yes or no, probably. Well, I guess not. Have you rented this dwelling and earned money from it?
Yes.
Yeah. And what was the minimum length of time you rented that out and earned money from it?
Since my conversations with the town, the minimum length of time has been 30 days or longer.
And just for clarity, just for the people in the audience, you'll get a chance to speak. Just when was that time that you're mentioning? You referenced a couple of times.
January and July of 2018, I believe. Yeah, January, July, August of 2018.
So you're saying that since August of 2018, you have not rented that house out for money for less than a month?
That is correct.
If I may ask, how many times have you rented out for more than a month in that period? approximately?
I can't recall off the top of my head. I think there was 1 month for 2019. I don't believe I had any month for 2018. And there is, I think, 1 or 2 months for 2020. So about 15% of the time.
Okay. And so you're saying in 2019, you rented it out once for a 1 month period, and that was it?
Yes.
I think that's good. Any other questions? Thank you. So in the process, thanks very much. In the process, this is now an opportunity for people who support the appellant to speak in favor of the appeal. And I'll ask us, as you know, 3 times. Anybody else who would like to speak in favor of the appeal? Anybody else in favor of the appeal? Do we have any letters in favor of the appeal?
No, we did not.
Thank you. Those who would like to speak in favor of the town's position, so against the appeal, this is your opportunity. Step right up, sir, and tell us who you are, and at some point just write your name down so we have it.
Board, my name is Dennis Best. I'm a full-time resident at 3 Bluegrouse Ridge, 4 doors down from Dr. Stadnick's property. I'm also a director and chairman of the board of the Bluegrouse Ridge Condominium Corporation. I made a written submission to this board on behalf of myself and on behalf of the corporation in response to the appeal by Dr. Stadnick to the stop order issued on November 7th, 2019. I've been a full-time resident of Bluegrouse Ridge for more than 5 years and a member of the board of the Bluegrouse Ridge Condominium Corporation for 4 years. I have experienced personally the impact of the rentals at number 7 Bluegrouse Ridge, and I've been dealing with the complaints lodged with the condominium board since 2017, as more particularly set out in my written submission. As the president of the corporation, I've communicated extensively with the town of Canmore bylaw enforcement on this matter. The board sent numerous letters to Dr. Stadnick and has imposed several fines pursuant to the corporation bylaws. On November 7th, the town issued a stop order to Dr. Stadnick for the non-conforming use of his property as a tourist home. That property is zoned R1 residential single family, a zone that doesn't allow the operation of a tourist home. The stated reasons for the stop order are that a development permit hasn't been issued, a business license hasn't been issued, and the property was being advertised as a tourist home on a vacation rental website, vrbo.com. In fact, I have made 7 copies of Dr. Stadnick's advertising on vrbo.com between June 1st, 2019 and November 6th, 2019 inclusives. These captures are available online if you wish to review them. Dr. Stadnick's written appeal submission does not address or respond to any of the reasons for the stop order. He was clearly advertising on vrbo.com. He does not deny that he was advertising or even refer to it in his appeal submission. And just a couple more comments that I haven't written down, but 12 owners in Bluegrouse Ridge filed submissions in support of the town. Five of us are here tonight. There were 6 adjacent owners that were notified. One of those is a vacant lot. The other 5 all filed submissions supporting the town's decision to stop the vacation rentals. And just to make it clear, what Dr. Stadnick has been saying is that he had one month rental in 2019, and I think that may be right. There was a couple of trucks parked in his driveway for about a month, and but there was In 2019, there was probably 2 or 3 rentals of less than a week that occurred within about a 7-week period. In 2018, we were putting up with back-to-back weekly rentals. People would normally show up on a Saturday at noon, and they would leave on the following Saturday. And there were different people every week. And I think the people that are in the back here that are the neighbors can verify that they have all seen various people in the house on a weekly basis. This has been going on for over 10 years. I can actually refer you back to advertising that Dr. Stadnik was doing on vrbo.com. We've made captures of that advertising, and I can say even back to 2014. And in response to your question about $250 a night for 30 days, $7,500, Dr. Stadnik was charging 5,600 Canadian dollars per week for his house. So 7,500 is nothing. In fact, it's an invitation for people to contact him and say, I'd like to stay for a week. What would the weekly rate be? And then he says 5,600 or whatever it is, and then they stay. So that's what the reality is. It's a high-end house, and it's a nice neighborhood, and we've had to put up with this for too long, and we've just been working on it to try and stop him, but you've heard his answers tonight. He doesn't seem to want to give you a straight answer. Anyways, I urge you to reject his appeal. Thank you very much. Oh, sorry, yeah. Yeah, okay, sorry.
Any board members have any questions?
You mentioned that you've been sending Dr. Stasny some fines for bylaw infractions. What type of bylaw infractions?
For our condominium bylaws are very clear. They say that you're not allowed to operate a tourist home as defined by the Town of Canmore bylaws. So they align completely with the town. So we've fined him, I think, $10,500 for operating a tourist home. And that's over a number of we started off at $500 once or twice, and then increased it to $1,000 a couple of times, and then a couple of thousand. I think the last one was $4,000, but he hasn't paid the fines. So, and we often talk to his tenants. They say they don't know who he is. They don't know. He often says, "Well, they're friends of mine," but they don't know him. I mean, I could say to you, "Am I your friend?" We've barely met. You might say on a scale of 1 to 10, 0 or 1. If I said to you, "I'm going to give you $5,600 and let me stay in your house for a week," we'd probably be friends, I would guess. So, and that may be the nature of the friendship. I don't know. So.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I have a couple. Just, you mentioned that the rate per week was $5,600?
Yes.
And how do you know that?
I can show you a copy of his website advertising.
Okay, so it's different than the material we've got, but
so what happened was he was advertising on vacation rental by owner for weekly rentals up until December of 2017. And in September of 2017, we realized the town was cracking down on vacation rentals, and we were getting a lot of complaints from the neighbors. And so there was 2 people in Bluegrouse Ridge that were doing weekly rentals on short-term rentals that they shouldn't have been doing, Dr. Stadnik and another person. And rather than just notifying the town that here's some advertising, find these people, we gave them both an opportunity to stop their advertising and to stop their rentals. And the one person did, and Dr. Stadnik didn't, okay? And finally, by December of 2017, 3 months later, I actually got online and tried to book a 13-day vacation in 2018. And I got as far as putting my credit card in to pay $11,400 and something dollars. And that's when I stopped, okay? And Dr. Stadnik then took his advertising down, but by the time he did, he already had about 70 days of bookings for 2018. And he ran those bookings more or less according to the calendar for the entire year of 2018. And so that was, but I can certainly provide you with a copy of the advertising showing 5,600 a week. Or
That's, I don't need that
no, but that,
right now.
That
but
was that advertising finished in 2017 December, and he started advertising again in June of 2019. So there was about 18 months.
The second question, you've alleged that besides the 1 month rental in the 2019, last year, that there were some short-term rentals. And
yes, there was different people in the house all the time. There was probably 3 of them, I think, at least, but there was fewer. But I mean, I live down the street. If I don't go by his house, I don't really notice, but there's other people that live around there, not even the adjacent neighbors, but some of them that live up the street, that walk their dog down the street. They go up and down. They say to me, "No, there's new people in, just arrived."
thank you. One other question, I guess.
So were your residents of the neighborhood actually calling bylaw at any point in time, or were you trying to manage it through the condo corporation?
No, they did both. We sent a lot of emails to the neighbors here, sent a lot of emails to the town in 2018, okay? And we weren't really getting anywhere. The town told us that unless there was active advertising, that they wouldn't be able to do anything. They said it was harder to prove in court. So in 2019, when I noticed the active advertising, I notified the town. And we didn't say anything to Dr. Stadnik. We had given him a chance already to voluntarily stop, but he didn't. So we went ahead and just notified the town. And it wasn't just one email to the town. That was in June of 2019. I notified the town. I had to do it again, maybe 3 or 4 times before the town took any action. So.
And these rental opportunities were on the site at the time?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. I didn't want to tip them off that the town would be looking into it.
So it was referred to the town. And what about November 7th? Was there a referral to the town at that point?
Well, I referred it to Richard back in probably September, and he worked on it for a month or 2 and finally issued the stop order on November 7th. But just coincidentally, I captured a copy of his website on November 6th, and I think Richard captured a copy on November 7th. So.
Can I ask one more question?
Yeah.
Were there any other bylaw infractions during that period of time, like noise?
You know, I don't think anybody called the police. There's been problems with when you get 10 people, what happens is people show up, there could be 5 or 6 cars even at times, and so people park on the street, and that's actually a condominium bylaw infraction, parking on the street. It's a fire safety issue. And, but normally we don't fine anybody because of that. I don't think we've ever fined anybody for having their visitors park on the street for a day or 2 or a week or whatever, because it's just not, I mean, we can get too petty in these things, but we don't go into that sort of stuff. So, and as far as noise goes, I think noisy parties, you could call the police if it was really vexing, but I don't think people do. They just put up with it. And people have been putting up with it for the last 10 years.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anybody else who would like to speak in support of the town's position? Please.
My name is Miriam Carrier, and I live at 27 Blue Grouse Ridge, so I live directly across the street from number 7. This has been going on for 10 years, at least, every weekend, all summer long. Every time there's a long holiday in the U.S., we have neighbors. They've come and parked sometimes in our driveway. They have parties. There's young kids sometimes that are there where the parents go out at night and they party in the back. Now, I know that Alex has nothing to do with that. He's got renters there. And when you talk to them, they're all nice people, and they say the same thing. Alex told us to say, we're friends of Alex. They park all over the place, and if everybody who lived in our community did what Alex did, we wouldn't have a nice community. And many, many of us are permanent livers there now, or I have been a permanent liver, and we are always directly impacted by all of these people. And that's all I have to say.
Just stay there for any questions of Ms. Carrier? Thank you very much.
Okay.
Oh, can you just write your name on the sheet over there?
Okay.
It's just right there, just so we spell it correctly in the minutes. Is there anybody else who would like to speak in support of the town's position against the appeal? I'm going to ask one more time. Just give you a few seconds to think about it. Is there anybody else who would like to speak? Yeah, sir? Please come to the mic and come up. It's a relaxed environment.
My name is John Carrier, and my wife just spoke. The thing is, all I wanted to say was that we made a commitment when we bought this home and property that there was a number of laws that we had to stick to. Okay, one of them is their house cannot be rented for less than a month and could be rented for 6 months. But anyway, there's been times, my wife mentions there's parties, but for me, it's my driveway and his driveway are right behind each other. And when this happens with all these people that do come, there's been up to 6 cars in the driveway. I used to take pictures of all their license numbers and tried to inform the people, head of the community here, about these pictures, but at that time, nobody was interested. And there were different cars every week, not the same ones. So weekends went away, they'd be there 4 days. There was a wedding there one time, the reason I remembered it is that the Sunday part of the weekend they were there, the fella come across the street to say hello to me, and he offered me a bottle of his champagne for excusing him for all the noise they make. I said, no, thank you, but that's what happened. Thank you.
Just 1 minute, sir.
Okay.
Any questions of Mr. Carrier? No? Thank you, sir. Just write your name there. Is there anybody else who would like to speak in support of the town's position against the appeal?
My name is Susan Hearn. I live at number 4 Bluegrass.
Thank you.
My concern comes from a slightly different angle in that our street is quite a steep, a narrow road, and my house is right on an almost 90-degree turn in the road. And one of the issues that I feel personally about is that when we have people on the street that don't live on the street and are visiting, a lot of them are not familiar with the mountains. They're not familiar with our road. And so I've seen many times that children and even adults with them are not really safe on our road, or they allow their children to ride toboggans or bikes or whatever up and down our road, which is right in front of my house. And I feel it's a safety hazard because the people on Blue Grouse know the road, and they understand it, and they are respectful of how to drive on our road. But new people that are just there for a short time, they have no idea. And they often, I feel, can put us in a situation where I don't want to see an accident right in front of my house, where children are going down on toboggans or bikes or scooters on a very steep pitch, and somebody's trying to drive up that road and can't see them because of the turn. So that's my concern about it. I think it puts the residents in an awkward position. That's not really fair. That's all I can say.
Just one minute, we'll see if we have questions. Any questions? Yeah. I have one. Just so I understand you're concerned about safety in the road, but are you also affirming that you believe that this house is rented out on short term?
Yes.
Yeah.
That it's common knowledge on the street.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, thanks very much. Yeah, just reminded, please sign over there so we get your name spelt right.
My name is Alec Bertiger. I live in 17 Blue Grouse Ridge. It's just kitty corner from Alec's house. And from my TV room there, I can see people coming and going. And usually 2 days before somebody shows up at that house, there's usually a concierge company or somebody in there fixing up the house to get it ready for the new renters. And I know when there's going to be a renter there because there'd be somebody there a few days before. And this has been going on for years. And that's all I got to say. Any questions?
Any questions?
No.
Yeah. Just, if I may, sir. So you see this house as well, you said?
Pardon?
And can you just,
yeah,
would you affirm or deny that it's being rented out on a short-term basis? You say you see it very clearly.
Well, it looks, they're there for a week and they're gone, and then there's somebody else coming. Yeah. They're short-term rentals for sure.
Thank you.
And I live there permanently, so I see it every day.
And would there have been short-term rentals in 2019?
I believe there has been, yes. I didn't take dates down in that, but I would swear that there have been.
Okay. Thank you, sir. And if you just put your name down, that'd be wonderful. Is there anybody else who would like to speak on this matter? This is your last time. Anybody else who would like to speak against the appeal in support of the town? We'll close that session. Has there been anything in writing, Jolene?
Yeah, we received 12 submissions in opposition to the appeal, all from the property owners of 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, 17, 21, 25, 26, 27, and 30 Blue Grouse Ridge.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And those are the ones we have copies of. Is that right? Yes.
Correct,
Thank you.
yes.
Thanks. There's an opportunity now for anybody who would like to speak in a neutral position on the matter, neither for nor against. Is there anybody in that category? I'll ask 2 more times. Anybody who would like to speak either for or against? Sorry, neither for nor against, but on the matter. Final time. Anybody else who would like to speak on this? Thank you. So that's, and we probably have no letter. I shouldn't assume. Do we have any letters on that?
No correspondence, no.
Okay, thanks. So I would have the appellant come forward and make any comments that he wishes.
You have heard my presentation. You have heard from Mr. Best, and Mr. Best went on record saying that the board initiated multiple complaints to enforcement, and these resulted in enforcement action in 2018, and the town of Canmore enforcement deemed that this property was not out of compliance at that time. You have my emails from January till August, and my statement that my activity since August of 2018 to the moving forward were all long-term rentals of a minimum of 30 days. Now, the way it's portrayed on the site, it's broken down to a per diem charge, but that's, I guess, so people can compare it. But I have not had a rental other than visits by, I think, my business associate for a period of less than 30 days. And we had a family reunion in September during the Labor Day weekend, and that was also for a period of less than 30 days. But insofar as I'm concerned, during the period that the stop order was initiated and before, the property use was in compliance with the land use bylaw.
Thank you. Any comments?
Just to clarify, you just said that you were in compliance after the point of the stop order and before.
Correct. You know, from my email communications to the town of which I provided you.
Okay, thank you.
And just carrying on that, you believe you're in compliance from what date?
It would be around August of 2018.
And last question, do you still advertise at all for this?
No.
Nowhere?
No, I do not advertise. And my question to the board is, what constitutes legitimate advertising for a long-term rental in the town of Canmore? Is that through a realtor? Is that through a website? What is a legitimate advertising for long-term rentals?
I don't think you'll get that answer here. I think you have to go to the town and ask them.
All right.
Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, we can't tell you what would be legitimate. It's not our function. But the town presumably can.
Okay.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate your time. Last up, town.
Just with regards to that last comment, just around, you know, what sites are appropriate, you know, for long, I guess for like a permanent resident. You know, there are rental sites such as, you know, like Rent Faster, you know, which are targeted towards a property resident, you know, let's say, and for someone who's coming in, you know, for like a weekend or like a week. So I'm one option I'm available. There are others, but that's the one that, you know, like really comes to the top of my head. Just to go back a bit here and just provide some further clarity just around some interpretation. There's been lots of discussion around the term short-term. You know, the land use bylaw is not clear around what that actually is. So I don't think that should really be the focus here. The focus really needs to be around the intent of, you know, the property and the way it was advertised. So if we look at the way that it was advertised, it's advertised on a vacation rental website. It's advertised, you know, with an unlimited co-regulation on the actual stay. It'll say, like 30 nights. But as you can see in the review comments throughout, they're indicating that they've been there for a week, 10 days, which are all characteristics of a tourist home. The other thing too that, we need to look at here, which is not typical of like a property resident living there, are, these things such as cancellation fees. On like the website itself, it shows cancellation fees of up to 100% if you cancel before 60 days, and if you're within 30 days, it's 50%. Something, again, it's not typical, for like a long-term tenant or a property resident. Those kind of options aren't a negotiation. The other thing we need to look at here too is that, we do have, it's called the daily, or like the average fee for a one night, which is not something typical. Again, if you're going to be there for long term, you're not really looking at a one night stay. So the use of this website is very clear in its intent, and that's what we need to be focusing on, is what the intent of the advertisement is, the intent of the use of the property, not whether or not it's short term, because that's not really clear within land use bylaw. So we just need to be looking at it, from a perspective of what is the intent, and that's what we in the planning department and our land use bylaw and enforcement officer is looking at. The last thing as well, this is just to provide you some clarity just around the condo board again, because that question did come up. The condo board, will set their own regulations, their own policies. Those are all things the town has no involvement in. Ideally, it's good if they're in alignment with land use bylaw, which it seems like they are. They don't want to have tourist homes in here. The zoning on the land does not allow for it, so there is alignment there. Just provide you some clarity. I think that's really it from us. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Any questions of the town? I think I'm good too.
Good.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you.
So I'll just ask the board, this would be the time ahead of the close of the hearing. Do you want to recess? Do you need any time to talk this over? Do we need more information before we close the hearing? No, I don't see anything. So based on that, I'll ask the appellant, do you believe you've had a fair hearing?
No, I do respect the members of the board, but I don't believe this really has been a fair process.
Would you like to elaborate so we can improve in the future? Yeah, yes, thank you. Yeah. Yeah.
The stop order is for actions as of November of 2019. We're going back in time and we're having all sorts of evidence introduced of actions that are non-verifiable. I provided emails of my correspondence with the town of Canmore. Those emails are not located on the town of Canmore server and not in accordance with the data retention policy established by the town. So while I have every respect for you, I'm not sure that this is a fair and transparent process.
Just, if I may clarify that, there's two aspects. One is whether you're getting a hearing that's fair, and the second is whether the proceedings and the process that was undertaken to get you here today was fair. And I think we can't say very much about the other aspects and the records retention policy. We certainly have the material you sent us. We have a fairly thick package here of material. But are you saying that you did not like the way the board undertook its action? I'm seeking to clarify this so we don't make the same mistake again, if in fact we're not fair to you.
Well, you've heard a lot of hearsay and circumstantial statements here, and yes, I wish to stay on task and provide you with factual basis, and for the period of time of this hearing and action.
Do the board members have any comment?
Just, I suppose, to say, as Mr. Birch noted earlier in the evening, that this is a public hearing and people can come and say what they wish, but we will only consider relevant planning matters in our decision making. So there's a very limited number of things that we can actually consider when we make a decision.
I appreciate that.
I think what we as a board are incumbent to is to provide an opportunity for a fair hearing, following the procedures, following the process of the hearing. What's happened with you in the past, with your neighbors in the town, is part of the problem, but what we are doing here today is giving everybody the opportunity for process. So the question I think you were asked is, did you feel you had a fair hearing?
I think in terms of hearing my information, I'm satisfied with that.
And that's what we're here for. We're here to hear both sides of the story and to determine what the outcome should be.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you. I think both of you made better points than I did. That's good. Thank you very much for coming and attending.
Thank you very much for your time.
And we'll make our decision within 15 days.
I appreciate it.
Thanks. With that, I'll declare the hearing closed. For the record, what we would normally do now is go into our business section, the one that you heard when we elected the chair and the vice chair. You can all sit here and we approve minutes and things like that, and then we'll close and go in camera and discuss the matters, the two hearings. So if you want to sit around, you may, but you're free to go. So do we need a break just before we do the business items? Do you want a quick break? Yeah. Are we happy to proceed with the business items? And items there. Hopefully you all have that. Someone to move the agenda? Someone to move the agenda?
I'll move to accept the agenda.
All in favor? Next item on the agenda is adoption of the minutes. The first is August 26, 2019, appeal hearing DP 2019-125 / BE 2019-2018 and BE 2019-19. So there are three appeals. I was not at that meeting, but what do people think? And do we have somebody who will move this? Move adoption? So Jill wasn't there either.
But technically, we can approve.
Yeah.
I was there.
Yeah.
So I move to approve the minutes.
Any? Yeah. Yeah. Any concerns? Harry, were you there? I think you were.
I was there.
Yeah. Any
now, the
concerns?
only the one that was 018, if you go to the questions of development officer by the board, I think there's on the second line, the board asked when the order was issued and if there was a fine. The administration asked to clarify. There should be a space between clarify and if. Okay? It's the only, otherwise I'm fine. If we need a seconder, I'm fine with those.
So will you allow your motion to be amended to with the one correction? Approve with the one correction? All in favor? Carried. The next one is August 26, the business meeting. I guess adoption of those minutes. No further down. Anybody have any concerns or issues with that? And if I could get a motion from probably someone who's there.
I make a motion to accept the business meeting minutes.
For August 26, 2019. All in favor? Approved. Next scheduled business meeting, we probably don't have to worry about that until after the hearing or another hearing. Does anybody else have anything else they would like to deal with? Any other business? No. Motion for adjournment.
I'll make that motion.
All in favor? We're adjourned. Now, would you like a recess